Let's move this way, Brooke. Okay, that should be good.
Okay. Hi guys.
Hi. So, for my, since we all work at Erskine's, the article that I selected was the Tear Down Your Behavior Charts, and it's basically just about like how behavior charts can be really damaging for students, and how we need to teach students to like self-regulate and just overall be held accountable in natural ways instead of punishments and like threatening. So some of the data that I'm using again is just that we're a Title I school, we're 80% economically disadvantaged, and in the last year we had 53 safety and disciplinary incidents, which again is pretty high, and obviously the imaginary goal would be 0, but you can always want that. But so basically the school has been talking about concerns of fighting within the school. So again, we do have a lot of disciplinary problems. So my article basically again talked about that a lot of the students who are getting their cards pulled the most, or they're getting the most in trouble, oftentimes are the students who need the most love and the most care. So pulling the cards is not helpful for them.
Yeah.
And it gives the students an overall negative view of themselves because they see themselves as the bad kid, the kid who can't do anything right. So one of the strategies that I really pulled out of this was that teachers need to hear the students out and keep it off stage. So when you see the kid misbehaving, not yelling at them in front of the class, but again, later pulling them aside and like addressing it and helping them realize why they did the behavior.
Yeah.
And then once they realize the behavior, you can teach them ways to just not like alternatives for their behavior. So instead of getting frustrated and yelling, maybe they can walk away, take a little break, things like that, just to help de-escalate the situation and just, again, teaching them self-regulation.
Yeah. Mine actually kind of goes along with that because I chose to do the article addressing dangerous behavior in the classroom. And it started off with an example of a situation where a student was very frustrated with his peers for talking nonstop, and it eventually led to him storming out of the classroom and slamming the door, which broke the glass inside the door. And he said a lot of things that were not school appropriate. But my article talked about de-escalation, which I know you just said that yours talked about. So, of course, I looked at our in-school suspensions and our safety and disciplinary incidents, which of course we have 53. And I mainly looked at that because how do we handle situations like that student where he is very frustrated, and usually in our kind of school situation, I feel like we would probably just send him to detention or some other alternative, which I think is not really how we should be doing that. So what I want to do for my session is to kind of talk about how we can de-escalate the situation, how we can prevent it from happening at all, and what are other ways that we can keep all students safe and make sure that they feel very connected to everyone else, and make sure that they understand the proper ways to go about things, and how can we as educators understand what our role is in that situation, as well as admins, because I feel like we've all had administrators in our past that have not done the proper thing and just kind of not cared about the students or the situation, even though it is very dire. So I really want to outline what the proper protocol is for us and how to kind of go about that, whether it be through interactive lectures or role-playing situations.
And just to expand on that real quick, I think it's also important for us as teachers to know the relationship that the students have at home, because that will also help with the knowing their perspective of why they're acting out, why they're acting.
Exactly.
So a question on that, would you use the same procedures for all behaviors, or would you just, depending on like the class for instance, like would you take that differently, or would you use the same procedure for every behavior that happens?
I feel like it would need to be a case-by-case basis, because it wouldn't be fair to treat a student if they, God forbid, punched another student differently than, oh, I slammed the door a little too hard. I feel like that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I feel like it would have to be a case by case basis. How we would go about that is another question. I'm not the principal,
Yeah.
so that's their job to handle that, but it's definitely something that we all need to talk about as the community in Erskine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, what Brooke said about relationships and knowing your students. The article I chose to talk about today was respect and rapport, and the phrase "you don't know what's happening to me." Specifically, you don't know me like that. That's the article. So pretty much this was about knowing your students in a respectful way, but also being able to like behaviors and how like don't take it personally if like they are from like a domestic family or if they're homeless or if they're in foster care. So some data I used to think about was there's over 13,000 kids in Indiana in the foster system. Specifically in Anderson, I don't know, I couldn't find that number. I think it's roughly around 400 to 500 students are in foster care. A lot of these students also come from like 40 or 14% excessive drinking and the crime rate and just everything that happens in our community. Like you don't know where your students are coming from. So the article was really good at like explaining like how to know your students without asking them and like getting to know the parents. Not asking them the like serious questions like what are you going through? Like how's your student's home life? But like taking key details that like the student didn't eat dinner, the student hasn't had breakfast. Is this mom a single parent? Is the dad a single parent? Like really knowing what your students are going through. So some problems with bringing this to teachers is you don't want them to feel like they're not respecting their students in any way. And a lot of teachers might go about well, I think I do good at that already. So a lot of role playing and have you thought of it this way? Have you done this in your classroom? Just giving them more ideas so they don't feel offended that you don't think I'm respecting my students or I'm not doing well personally getting to know them or I'm offending them. So that's kind of one of the problems with bringing this to teachers is that you don't want them to feel offended in any single way. Also, it can be really hard knowing these things and not getting too invested and like emotionally attached to your students. So if you do know they've been in 6 foster homes and they're only in 4th grade, like that can put a lot of damage on the relationship with the teacher and the student, and you don't want to like single them out and make them feel more welcomed and kind of exaggerate the feeling of being a teacher and be like, oh my goodness, welcome, like be happy towards that student. You just want to like make sure everyone is treated the same, but you also just want to be aware of how your environment in your classroom is when you go to respecting all your students. And if they do use the phrase, you don't know me like that, don't take it like personally in that the way you go about discipline. You don't want to take it personally if they are hitting you or throwing a desk because you don't know where they're coming from.
Yeah, I see our articles kind of relate a lot because
Yes.
mine talks about like, like don't take it personally and just knowing that those kids who are acting out the most are the ones who like need the most love and most care.
Yeah.
So
So my article also kind of connects with your guys's, but it is different. Let's pull it up real quick. So mine is, are those kids really out of control? And this article is about classroom management and how to manage a class. Oh, let me present it. And how to manage a class. So I kind of have the same data as long with you guys since we're all at Erskine, so I'm going to skip through that real quick. But I'm really going to highlight the data of what Ms. Smith talked about with the fostering, with their at-home life, with the excessive drinking backgrounds, with all that too, so keep that in mind. So my tentative plan is to meet and give a direct instruction on why knowing why the students are out of control. And so with these sessions, I would do first like a direct lecture, kind of like the psychology like behind a student, and they're all developmentally at different stages. And then I would break up into discussions and have teachers talk about, okay, how would you manage a child if they did this, or how did you manage when they did this, and then do a role play, kind of like how we've been talking about. Just give the teachers a more not feel like their pride's getting hurt with how they've been handling situations. Because no one, like, kind of like when you see a parent, you're like, oh, I want to tell them how to parent, but they're parenting wrong. Kind of like teachers. So I kind of just talked about that, and then, so I would do role play, and then some potential barriers that I would say is some teachers think that they know best sometimes in every situation, and that we need to respectfully do a role play that would, teacher would play a uncontrollable student, and then another teacher would play a teacher that would manage that student in a proper way and an improper way so that everyone can see how they could effectively handle that. And then this is also to tie along with getting to know your students more. It's a teacher's job, I say, at the beginning of the year to kind of get to dive in on your students, get to know their home life, get to know where they're coming from. So teachers need to invest in the students, and some barriers that the students might have is they might not feel comfortable sharing, or they might not be allowed sharing where they're coming from, and that can be a barrier of that relationship, that closeness, that chemistry between a teacher and a student. Just if that happens, a teacher can't put up a wall to that student that, you know what, they're not sharing information, so I can't get closer to them, so I'm going to treat them differently than if I was to someone else. So those are some possible barriers and then some challenges is I think some teachers might think the delivery of the role play and the discussions are just not like the correct way to handle the situation. I can see a lot of teachers still doing the pocket charts and well, I think the pocket charts are right, and then a teacher be like, no, I don't think the pocket charts are right. And I can see a lot of barriers with the content delivery, role play.
It also can be like a generation thing.
Yeah,
I feel like the new incoming teachers are more like relationships and respecting and classroom family, and then older generations are like, they're there to learn standards. Behavioral is like a big thing, and so I think it can be hard finding that generation equal,
that's kind
happy
of
medium.
That's kind of one of the barriers I put, was saying that some people may be like, pocket charts are the only way to manage kids. Those behavior charts are so important in my classroom. Besides that, they won't listen. Whereas other teachers are like, no, I found way better ways that aren't so negative. So
Well, and at Erskine, they have a mix. From the data, they have a good mixture of the veteran teachers and new upcoming teachers. So there's going to be a lot of clash.
big difference.
So I think it could just be difficult trying to do any of this in front of a panel teachers, because some people have been doing this for 15 years, some 30, and so it can be hard to be like, okay, now we really want you to focus on respecting, because if they haven't done that for 20 plus years, then it's like, why do it now?
Exactly.
So it can just be.
And I do think teachers need to understand Anderson as a community, because we all know what Anderson City is like, and we see that they're trying to revamp the roads and buildings, but it's not like anything it should be, especially for little kids growing up in a community like this. So teachers need to take that into consideration, where they're coming from, just as a city as a whole. So
And a lot of teachers don't know the statistics of the city as a
that's
whole.
very true.
Do many of them know that there's over 2,000 crimes happening? I
It's
didn't
daily.
until I researched this, and
Yeah.
there's 13,000 foster care in Indiana. It's just you gotta know these things, and it takes time. It takes time to research all of this. So I think just knowing where your kids are coming from.
Does anyone have any more barriers? That I'm kind of interested in hearing some more barriers to some of the strategies.
Something that I kind of ran into that actually kind of connects back to what you were saying about role playing and all of that was I was torn between having it be a whole group role playing situation where they kind of watch a couple people do it, or having them break up into smaller groups and giving them each different scenarios, but then you don't get everyone practicing every scenario, which could be a potential barrier, and you don't get as much experience with that kind of stuff. So that was something that I kind of battled with when doing my thing. And I would love to hear your guys' opinion on that, whether it would be beneficial to have everyone just kind of take notes and watch something, or have everyone actually participate in the smaller groups. What do you guys think? Because I'm kind of stuck on that.
I feel like you could do both, like maybe at the beginning do a whole and then they watch, like you could do one where like the teacher doesn't address it right and everybody watches and then everyone will be like, oh yeah, that clearly didn't go well. And then you could break them out into groups at the end and practice the like new strategies and all that.
Oh,
So maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think as long as everyone's on the same page, from like principal to other staff members to teachers, and then they can relay it to the students and guardians, family. I think as long as everyone's on that same page from that role play, I think it will make the procedures of the school be a lot smoother and a lot cohesive.
Okay. I agree. I think as long as like they're all getting like the message that's getting across. I think that's the hardest part with any of this is like you don't want it to go in one ear and out the other.
Right.
Like obviously there's a problem, so we're not gonna like talk about them. So I think as long as they either see something acted out or they're like experiencing it, I think it should get the point across.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. Anything else?
I think that's about
Good,
it.
alright.
Yeah, very similar stuff, so.
Well, that we talk.
Yeah, for sure.
Have a good day.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.